I'm going to start off. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of Conversation from the Trenches. Today, we have a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about a very special topic. Now, this is something I talk about every time I have a conversation on a Friday evening. I say my guest is special. I say my topic is special. But today's topic is uber special. And the reason it's very special is because I believe this is something the universe has made happen in a very organic way. For you see, I was actually meant to talk about gender and sexuality with my soul brother, who is an out and proud gay man. And we had plans to talk about this. We had our questions ready, we had everything ready. And due to circumstances, he couldn't make it. But he very generously, very graciously invited Ronie to join us instead of him. And I thought over the past 3 days, after speaking with Ronie, I think this is the best thing ever to happen. Because for once, all of us have this incredible opportunity to get to know about the lives, the lived realities, the challenges, and the wonderfulness of a population that we don't much have, information or knowledge or experience of. So, with that, I'm going to now put myself on mute for the most part of the conversation. Before that, I'm going to welcome our guest. I'm joined by Ronie Zuze, who is the founder and the director of the Intersex Community of Zimbabwe. Now, Ronie, if you have read if you've read all my collateral and my communication, you will know three things about Ronie. He's a very, very passionate intersex uh, advocate. He's somebody who fights for the rights and inclusion of intersex peoples across the world. He's a very passionate human rights defender, and he's at the forefront of the intersex rights movement in Africa, not just in Zimbabwe, but Africa, right? With that, I want to say welcome, Ronie. Thank you so much for joining me. As I have said repeatedly over the past few days, I am grateful that you are here with me today, and I am so excited to learn more from you. Can I invite you to share a little bit about yourself with my audience?
Thank you very much. I feel honored to be on this platform. And thank you for creating this conversation and for accepting me. For one thing that I know, you've accepted me for who I am, and you have given me this opportunity to share with the world, with everyone who's watching. So I'm really, really excited to be here. And I hope that our audience are going to learn one or two things about me and also about intersex people, especially those who cannot speak for themselves. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to Ronie. My name is Ronie Zuze, and as Reka has already introduced me, but I will repeat my after Rika as well. I am an intersex activist, and not only an intersex activist, but I am a human rights advocate, and I am also an intersex person myself, with lived realities. So I think this is something that I'm going to share with you, my journey, my story, in getting to know who Ronie really is. So Ronie, as Rika has already mentioned earlier on, to say that I founded the Intersex Community of Zimbabwe in 2018, towards the end of the year. And I'm also the director of the Intersex Community of Zimbabwe, operating from Zimbabwe. I think it is common knowledge that intersex people are very invisible, and it's not easy for one person to come out publicly to say that this is who I am or this is what I am. due to the stigma, discrimination. I can say also there is also fear, the fear of being different. So it has been a very, very, I can say, bumpy, groovy ride for me to be born intersex and have this journey as an intersex person up to where I am today. But I am proud that I have come out publicly as an intersex person. However, let me just start off sharing my story with you by saying I was born intersex. Being intersex is quite a bit complex in a way that there are many variations of intersex. One of the common variations is ambiguous genitalia. I will try to simplify it for the benefit of our audience, because I do not believe in throwing around big, complicated words whereby our audience will end up getting lost and imagining other things. Yeah, so it is important for me to do the simplification. So I think all of us, we do understand that whenever a baby is born, there is this $1 million question that is asked. Is it a boy or is it a girl? Simply because we live in a binary world whereby people are categorized by their gender and maybe their sex as well, to say, oh, you are a boy, so you are a he. Simply because we look at the genitals of a child, and that's when we come to conclude to say, oh, it's a boy, simply because there is a male genitalia or a female genitalia. But when we are talking about an intersex person of ambiguous genitalia, we are speaking of a person who is born with genitalia that is not clear, in a way that we cannot simply say that, oh, this is a girl, or oh, this is a boy. So by so doing, the medical term that they used in that way is that it is ambiguous. Ambiguous meaning that it's not clear due to the development, the biological development of the genitals. So, biologically, if a fetus is developing, there is a process that happens whereby I think we are all aware that maybe a fetus starts off as female, and then some biological stuff happens, and then depending on the chromosomes, our XX and XY chromosomes, they then probably develop in a way that you end up having an XX or an XY. It's quite a very complex development. I cannot get into it right now, but this is what happens, is that at the end of the day, when a child is born, they will end up, when their, can I say, karyotype, that is the makeup of their chromosomes, when they end up being XX or when they end up being XY. So in that sense, it can also inform maybe the development of the genitalia. I hope it is a bit simple as I am trying to explain it. So in my case, when I was born, it was a very good moment. Every time when a baby is born, parents are all happy, excited and all. So voila, it came out. It was a bit shocking. I cannot say a bit shocking. I think it was a very big shock. according to my mom, it was a very big shock, because when doctors looked at me, they were like, oh, okay. And my mom waited, a boy or a girl. Then it was ambiguous genitalia. It was ambiguous. It was not clear. I would, on that note, I would also want to dispel the misconception whereby people say that an intersex person is born with 2 sexual organs. That's a misconception.
Right.
Because so the correct term that we use is ambiguous genitalia, meaning that the genitalia of that baby is not clear. So
Right.
with that, I think it was a very confusing moment for my mom, because doctors were running around, all the healthcare practitioners, they were called, they tried to diagnose and maybe make sense out of it, because it's not something that usually happens. It is, some people would like to say that it is rare, but it is not that rare. It is something that is just, it just happens, but when it happens, most people tend to, or maybe they choose not to speak about it openly. And medical practitioners, they then start on a journey of fixing, I can say fixing, or correcting, so that that child fits into the male and female boxes, or maybe to say that their genitals look more of a male or more of a female. So this is exactly what happened to me, because during that time, doctors, they then assigned me male at birth, because they thought, simply because there is this genitalia that looks like a male sexual organ, but then we can also see that it's not really, it's kind of ambiguous. It's not clear. So but for now, let's say this child is a male. So that then led to me being raised as a boy. So I grew up, but then between the time of my birth and the time that I started going to school, it was a period whereby my parents were busy with all the medical procedures, the testing of all the other stuff. It's those are medical stuff that I don't even understand myself. But then they were just simply trying to correct me, and testing of my hormones, testing of my chromosomes, and also back then when I was born, because technology wasn't as advanced as it is right now. So sometimes they had to cut me up, look up into my inside reproductive organs, in order for them to establish, so that it can also inform how they are going to correct. So at some point they thought that simply because of my internal genitals, or my internal sexual reproductive organs, it was quite confusing for them, because I had what they call ovitestes, which is a combination of ovaries and testicles. Testes. Sorry, that's a wrong term when I say testicles. Testes. So it was very confusing, even for the medical professionals themselves. But still, they did attempt to correct so that I can be a boy. But then I think at some point, it was very, very confusing for them. I believe that medical practitioners, and professionals, they do all sorts of experiments
Yes.
whereby they are trying to help. Yes, we
Yeah.
understand, but they are also trying to learn about your situation. So
Yeah.
it was a situation of me being in and out of hospital. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and with that, it actually put a strain on the relationship of between my parents.
Yeah.
It was also very, very, I can say, mentally exhausting
Yeah.
for both of them, because
Mm-hmm.
every time, sometimes there would be arguments between the medical professionals, and sometimes they would be told that, oh, I think this one is a boy, or maybe sometimes they would say, I think they're a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, due to the findings, and also due to them, coming from, because when they do all these procedures, there is a set of professionals from urologists,
Yeah.
gynecologists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there will be a team of more than 8 medical professionals,
Yeah.
all those who specialize in different categories, whereby
Yeah.
they will be trying to assist.
Yeah.
Um, but then, in so doing as well, they do not realize that they are actually putting that psychological trauma upon the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
after
Thank you
that,
for
I
sharing.
was.
I said, thank you for sharing that, Ronnie, because when I was listening to you, what was coming at me was the child you were and how incredibly bewildering and difficult it must have been for you, not just for your parents, but it's hard for a child to be at the center of investigation. Because I think when medical science investigates, there is a sense of detachment which can sometimes be very dehumanizing, if you know what I mean. And that can be extremely hard for a child. Uh, that's been my experience. And I was just thinking of you as a child going through this and thinking, this must have been so hard and so difficult. And thank you for sharing this. I'm very grateful that you are sharing in such detail. Okay, I think Ronnie is frozen for a moment, but I'm going to take a quick moment to say thank you to everybody who is hopping in, saying hello. Deepa said hello. Sham said hello. Thank you so much for joining us. Ronnie Favor, I see you here, and thank you for your participation. You are talking about the work you do, and you say that this is very informative. I'm very grateful that you're here and you find this informative. And I'm going to invite everyone who's listening to ask questions if you must. If you have any thoughts, any questions as you listen to us have this conversation, I'm going to invite you to ask these questions. Yes, I see Tara Majumdar, Auntie. Hello, thank you so much for joining us. I can see Ronnie's having a little bit of internet trouble, but as we allow him to come back on, as I said, this is very honest sharing, and if you have something to share, please drop it in the chat box, and I will flash it on the screen and read it out to Ronnie as we go along. Ronnie, welcome back. I thought we dropped you, we lost you for a second. Can we invite you to continue telling us about your journey?
So my apologies. As I've mentioned earlier on, my network sometimes it's on and off. But I hope that it would be kind enough to allow us to continue without interruption.
We're keeping our fingers crossed now.
Thank you. Yeah. Right. Moving on from there, when doctors finally made a decision that
Yeah.
I could be raised. I could be raised as a boy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very confusing. It's very confusing for you as a person. It's very confusing for parents as well, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of uncertainty whereby
Yeah.
they're not certain whether we are doing the right thing, or
Yeah.
whether, yeah. So I was then they told me that I could be raised, and I started going to school. And
Okay.
to be honest with you, school wasn't fun,
Mm-hmm.
simply because of, um, you know, every time when such a thing happens, you would find that there is sometimes there are maybe family members who takes
Mm-hmm.
the secret, because the birth of an intersex child is treated with so much secrecy.
Yes.
But then you'd find that sometimes family members, they do take that and they leak that information to other people for the reasons better known to them.
Yeah.
Um, but that actually happens, and this is what happens: information leaked, and
Yeah.
also by people, maybe the community where I grew up, and yeah, and other people, at school, everywhere. When they got hold of that information, then that's where the problem started, because as I was going to school, yes, I was a boy, but I was this kind of a boy who looks like a girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so there was a lot of bullying at school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a lot of incorrect information, and a lot of things that being said about me behind my back. And I really didn't enjoy going to school. And even as I was, attending school, you have to make use of maybe the public um, spaces, such as maybe the bathrooms, or
Yeah.
maybe participating in sports. Sometimes,
Yeah.
as boys, we are asked to take off our shirts, and you are so aware of your own body.
Yeah.
You are told never to undress in front of people. And
Yeah.
when you are visiting the public toilet, the school bathrooms, you have to make sure that no one ever sees you. So it has to be your own private time,
Yeah.
whereby you make sure that no one ever finds out. So you have to go to the public bathrooms, in your own time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't an easy thing for me, an easy experience, but
Yeah.
it had to happen because I was a student. I had to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and then I grew up like that with all those challenges, a whole lot of other challenges. I can tell you that stigma and discrimination, it starts right from the family,
Yeah.
because there are people who are aware within the family that you are different,
Yeah.
and sometimes they use that to make you feel bad, or
Yeah.
to silence you, or just to bully you. So
Mm-hmm.
all that happened to me, and it wasn't easy because I was isolated. Even I didn't even enjoy the experience of maybe going to play um, as normally as other kids would.
Yeah.
For me, I would probably be allowed to go to play, and then maybe after some time, I am asked to maybe refrain, maybe come back and be
Yeah.
inside, indoors, study, and all that. So
Yeah.
all that was done maybe with an intention of trying to protect me.
Yeah.
However, I managed to go through my primary education. But then the biggest challenge started when I then had to start with my secondary education, because that's when puberty starts kicking in. So during that time, because of the characteristics, the sex characteristics, my sex characteristics, my system, can I say my biological system, was producing both male and female hormones.
Yeah.
So at puberty, as I was starting to become a teen, maybe an adolescent, there were some features, even though I was a boy, but there were some female features which started exhibiting themselves. So that was the most difficult period of my life, because now I had to hide, because I started developing some breasts. I think they started developing it around 16 years old, 17, somewhere there. So I had to start hiding my body, some of my body features.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very traumatic. And it also had its own toll on the relationship of my parents. So my parents decided to separate.
Yeah.
And after that, my dad had to disown me, because I think due to that, he couldn't explain it to people, because he was maybe a popular figure in our community. So now he had to explain, why is it that this young boy is starting to look like a girl. So he just disowned me. He said, "No, you can go to your mother." He had to say a lot of nasty things, which really affected me. And I then had to relocate, start a new life in a new area, living with my mom. But then the funny part is that I had to start the new life as a girl. So from there, from being a boy, at around between 16 and 17, I started living as a girl. So you can imagine, it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult for me to switch, from being the person that I used to know myself as, to being something else that is new, foreign, and everything.
I think,
And
when you tell me this, Ronie, what comes to me is we normally look at the teens, from the 30s to the 20s, at the time when we are forming our identity in more concrete terms. And to make a switch from masculine to feminine, and, because it's not just a biological switch, there is so much of your identity that tends to be tied up in the gender that you are told you should be. And when making switches is not easy, it can really be very hard from the perspective of self-esteem, of just even being comfortable in your body, right? Ronnie, you're on mute.
oh yes, I think there are some sounds on the background, so I'm trying to avoid it, the sounds from coming. But I will unmute when it's my chance to talk.
Yeah, so I was just talking about how it is difficult from the perspective of how we identify with ourselves, our own relationship with ourselves, and in terms of the self-esteem that we have. Ronnie?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. I'm with you.
Okay, I'll invite you to continue. Tell us more of your journey.
Okay, so I then grew up. Then from there, I started my secondary education because I'm sure it's the same as other countries, maybe in India as well, that after primary education, you have to move to secondary education.
Hmm.
So, as I was then going for my secondary education, that was a very challenging moment for me to start living
Yeah,
as a different gender, as you
yeah,
correctly said, it's not
yeah,
easy.
yeah.
Um, so that was very challenging, but then it had to happen. So I then started going to
Hmm.
school, and it really affected me psychologically as well. Um,
Yes,
and it then drove me to maybe should I call it risky behavior, because
yeah,
that's when I then had to take refuge um, in drinking, maybe to numb the pain, to get away from reality.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it wasn't easy. So I did went on with my education that then affected my performance at school. And yeah, but then after my secondary education, I didn't do well, even though I wasn't that dull at school. But but then it affected my grades. And after that,
yeah,
I then just had to run away from home because people were starting to question a lot of things because of what I'm expected to present as, and maybe the way that I'm supposed to express, how I'm supposed to express myself as,
yeah,
maybe in terms of my gender, because most
yeah,
people actually thought that I'm a tomboy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
with all that and people questioning, why am I like this? Why do I dress like this? Why do I behave like this? Why do I talk like this? Why
Right.
am I interested with
Yeah,
in people of probably those whom people view as the same myself same as my sex,
yeah,
So with all those, it became very difficult for me
yeah,
to continue existing within those settings. So
yeah,
I just said I ended up running away, and I was drinking heavily.
yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, it was quite challenging. And I then decided to go to a neighboring country. I went to South Africa, and I started living there. But then living in South Africa, that's when, because back in Zimbabwe, people didn't, this sense of sexuality and gender identity, in terms of like maybe one person being a lesbian or being a transgender, those were foreign things. So when
yeah.
I then connected with the LGBT community, I thought
Hmm.
that, oh, I think this is me. I had that sense of identity.
Right.
So I was then, in fact, I actually then identified myself as a lesbian,
Hmm.
simply because that was the closest that I could be, given
Yes.
how I now maybe how I was now living as. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so I was this masculine lesbian. Yeah, but then as I was forming relationships with other lesbian girls, I then discovered that no, but this was not me. I'm actually
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
And it also came with its own challenges
yeah,
because the moment that you get into maybe an intimate relationship with another girl, they would be expecting you to be like them so that you can actually form a lesbian relationship. But then for me, it was a different issue. So I then told myself, no, this was not me. But then I would keep it a secret and try to, play all those hide and seek games and all that. It continued affecting me. I had a lot of mental health issues. I had a drinking problem. I I had, I had suicidal thoughts. I actually attempted to kill myself more than 4 times. Um, but then within that space of time, I was privileged because I started, I think, seeking answers and trying to find myself and discover who I am. That's when I came across the term intersex. And I started researching and trying to connect with fellow intersex people around the world. But then most of the people that I would find, they mostly came from those who were out and who could speak openly about being intersex. They were coming from the global West, no, from the European countries and other countries, but not here in Africa. So for a long time, I had intersex friends from the global West, and we were talking, and we were like kind of like supporting each other, but it wasn't really helping because for me, I used to think that I'm the only intersex person in Africa, until such a time whereby I was then introduced to one intersex person because for me, somebody was just talking out in me. Do you see this person? They're like this and that and that, and then I was like, oh, this person is like me. They really didn't know who I am, but they were just speaking, just as human beings, how we do, we just speak behind someone's back. So for me, I kept my secret. But then I then reached out to the person and then we started sharing until there was a time we then arranged to meet. And but I remember that the first person that I discovered that was intersex was a white South African woman, and her name is Sally Gross. And unfortunately, at that time, she was living in a different state, so it was very difficult for us to meet. But then for another black person, whom I discovered after Sally, we then managed to meet. And for me, I think that was the most liberating, and that was an exciting discovery to say, oh, so I'm not alone. So then we then started talking until I think it was in 2017. So in 2017, they introduced me to, there was an intersex gathering that was happening in Johannesburg. So they invited me, and we attended the event. So I then met about 20, if I'm not mistaken, there were 26 intersex people from around Africa. So that was, for me, that was like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was, for me, it actually, it literally made me cry to see that, oh, so we are actually, we are there, we exist here in Africa. So I'm not an alien. I'm not something that, so for me, that human connection, it really meant a lot. So I think that was the start of my journey as an intersex activist, because these people, they were out and proud, and they were speaking openly about their own human experiences as intersex people. And they were so proud to say, look, I'm intersex, so what? There's nothing wrong. I'm a human being. I can do all things that a human being can do. And there's no big deal about it. So I think that was a groundbreaking moment for me.
Yeah, yeah. Ronnie, thank you so much because, coming into this conversation, I had a lot of questions about the lives and the journeys of people who are intersex, because I didn't know, I made assumptions about how vulnerable they were because of the mainstream's binary thinking. But through your journey, I have received so much of insight, so much of understanding of how difficult it can be to be alone, uh, when you are an intersex person, and how much the society around, starting from the family, starting from the communities we live in, how much they can affect us as people, right? So I want to kind of ask you about what would your message be to the mainstream? Because, the reason I ask this question is because although in recent times we are seeing a growing, the number of conversations about pride is increasing, as you very rightly pointed out, the narratives of the LGBT overshadows the narratives and the needs of the intersex people. And because, from what I gathered from your journey, because intersex involves traits, characteristics, physiological aspects of both the masculine and the feminine, the people who are intersex, their journey is very unique. That's what I'm getting. And when the mainstream tries to make people who are intersex conform, force them to conform, it can be very detrimental. It can be devastating for the person, right? What would you have to tell to people in the mainstream who are listening to this conversation, who will be listening to this conversation in the future? What would you have to tell them about inclusion? Why is it important for us in the mainstream to create space for people who are intersex to be, to help themselves come to understand who they are?
Um, can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. Thank you. Without me sounding as if I'm trying to attack people, because most of the time when I speak, some people get offended. I don't know for some reason, but sometimes I believe in speaking my mind without mincing my words or being, um, being apologetic about it. Um, I've always said that I think there is a lot of, first of all, I should say that there are a lot of misconceptions out there. When people hear the long LGBTI acronym, they just tend to bundle everyone, maybe using the word gay
Yeah.
or gays,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
without understanding the
Yes.
different groups, individually. But then,
Yes.
if we look at it, the LGB and probably the T, they have actually gained a lot of recognition, and people are starting to understand their
Yeah.
issues, who they are, and what are they all about, and stuff like that. But then when it comes to the intersex community, I think
Yeah.
sometimes it might not be someone's fault, but it is because there has been a lot of silence and a lot of secrecy around um, intersex people and intersex identities, and also the attempt by maybe society to try
Yeah.
to put everyone in boxes, maybe the gender and then sex boxes, whereby either one has to be male or female.
Yeah.
And also in terms of gender as well, that one has to be a man or a woman. But
Yeah.
then, without understanding that there are people who actually fall out of all those boxes that we all think that that's what it means to be normal.
Yeah.
Um, but then the truth of the matter is that within our groups of sex and gender minorities,
Yeah.
I have also seen that there is a lot of issues of may you allow me to use the term tokenizing, whereby maybe some people just feel that, oh, okay, we can use intersex people if we want to get something, or we can actually, and then we discuss of them, discard of them when it comes to matters that really matter,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to issues of inclusion,
Yeah.
because I remember at some point there were conversations of inclusion, and then we were being asked to share on what it means for you as a person. What does inclusion mean to you?
Yeah.
So for me, I think the most important thing for me was that for me, inclusion, it means that I am there, I'm visible, I've got a voice that I can use to effect, to make a change, whereby I
Yeah.
can listen, I can be given a platform. And
Yeah.
for me, if I do not, if I belong to a group that doesn't allow me to have a voice, to be
Yeah.
visible, to
Yeah.
maybe to voice out my issues, and and also be relevant in
Yeah.
that space, and
Yeah.
also to actually see that even as I speak, I
Mm.
need to have an effect. I need to
Yeah.
see things changing. I need, especially for those whom I call my own, they
Yeah.
really need to do something. I've done
Yeah.
my part, I've spoken, I've said something, and
Yeah.
they also need to do something about it. Not only to say, oh, shame, oh, we know, we understand. No, I don't need pity. I just
Yeah.
need to be relevant. I need to see the spaces being created. I need to hear my voice being recognized,
Yeah.
and also being taken into consideration in every
Yeah.
aspect
Yeah.
of my being. Um,
Yeah.
and as we are moving, and as we are fighting for recognition, for our rights,
Yeah.
for being relevant,
Yeah.
I also, as an intersex person, I really need to see that being practical, not only to be used to say, oh, okay, we had a workshop, and then we had three intersex people, so we included them. But then what did they have to do? What did they have to gain? What is being done by the community of
Yeah.
sex and gender minorities? What
Yeah.
are we doing in
Yeah.
order for us to make sure that we actually create an environment that allows them to, to,
Yeah.
to, to prosper, to be relevant, to, to actually have the gains that we are all enjoying. Because
Yes.
for me, pride can mean nothing if I do not have all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Ronnie, when you tell me this, what comes to me is in the mainstream, there's so much a conversation about diversity of inclusion. And one of the concerns that many of us who are very passionate and vocal about diversity and inclusion is about tokenism, that we talk about including, and we have poster boys and poster girls and poster people to say, hey, we're doing this, but the question really comes as to, are we really including? Are we really integrating? Are we really making a difference in terms of showing up and helping and bringing people in? You know, so what you're telling me resonates very deeply, not just within the LGBTQI community, but even in the mainstream, because there's always a sense that there is a the power dynamics uh, are not fair or equitable, if I may say so. Ronnie, are you still there?
Oh yes, I'm just trying to plug in my. Okay, my battery is almost dying.
Okay, fine. So before we wind up, I would like to I would like to hear from you. What would be your top three inclusion practices that you would offer to the listeners? What can people do to be more inclusive of the intersex peoples in our everyday life?
Um, I think it all starts. I don't have to blame anyone for the ignorance because I
Yeah,
think my journey, ever since I then, because for me, it started from a point whereby I had to seek for information, to start digging for information. So now that you've
yeah,
got the information, then what? What are you using the information for? So that's where I
mhm,
started as a person. I used
yeah,
that information in order for me to empower myself,
right,
to start looking down on myself and feeling pity for me, for
mm,
myself.
right,
So I think that's where we all have to start from. Once you've got the information, once somebody shares,
yeah,
then what? Do
yeah,
you just say, oh, okay, shame,
yeah,
and then life goes on, we move on, you feel shame, yeah. So for me, I think we have to start there, whereby now that you've got the information, now you are aware. How then do you use the information
yeah,
for it to make a change?
yeah,
Um, so I think if we start there, because ignorance is not an excuse. You can
absolutely.
have ignorance of the law and then you commit a crime. You still get arrested and you go to jail.
Yeah,
So once we do away with the ignorance, we have to, if we are saying that we are a community, we have each other's back, we
yeah,
need to mean it, not only to, yeah, use that information for your own benefit. And then once you've got whatever that you want, you discard that person. That's exactly what tokenism is all about.
yeah,
Um, so, and also to say that within the power dynamics, who holds the
yeah,
power and what are
yeah,
they doing with their power in order
yeah,
for them to make sure that they are being inclusive.
yeah,
One of the reasons why I appreciate being on your platform is that as much as you were concentrating or maybe doing your conversations with maybe those from the LGBT without even considering intersex persons, you did not close your space to say, oh, an intersex person, where do they fit in? Simply because I think for you, you actually proved to say that by you preaching diversity, you are not just preaching words without meaning. You actually opened up the space so that an intersex voice can actually come and be relevant. There might be some other intersex people out there and families of intersex children who are struggling, thinking that it's shameful, they should
yeah,
be pitied on. Uh,
yes,
but by you creating the space, I think it's a way of giving back somebody their power to say, I am reclaiming my power by
yeah,
means of actually stop feeling pity for myself and reclaim my power to say that, look, I am a human being. I am relevant. I am good. I am awesome. I'm fabulous. I am
uh,
everything that any human being can be. I can speak, I can use my voice, I can use my talents, I can do anything that anyone can do. There are
yeah,
intersex people who actually have relationships, meaningful relationships, those who
mhm,
have formed families.
yeah,
We need to create spaces such as this. We need
right,
to actually, you really don't have to give me any material things, but us doing the small little things, us
yeah,
um, being being instruments
yeah,
by doing all those little things. I think that's where we all have to start from. Now that
yes,
we've got the information, what do we do with the information?
yes, absolutely. For me, as you said, that's why I came clean up front and I said initially my conversation was to have been about gender and sexuality. But when I had the opportunity to have you as a guest, I was excited. I was super excited, even though I did not know much about the intersex people. Over the past 3 days, I've been reading and I've been learning and I've been thinking a lot about what I have been reading, and having conversations with you has really helped me reflect a lot. And this is something I want to tell everybody who is out there listening. Regardless of who you are, regardless of what your gender is, regardless of who you identify as, regardless, whoever you are, wherever you're on this planet, there is we all benefit from diversity. We don't benefit from homogeneity. We benefit from diversity. And it's only when we start opening our minds and listening, and we open our hearts and have really honest conversations, that we're really able to understand that what affects another person, no matter how different they are from me, affects me. And we are all interconnected. And it's only when we are able to open ourselves out and listen and accept and learn and embrace the diversity that we can grow and expand as human beings. There is no other way. There's just absolutely no other way. And Ronie, I'm so grateful to you for, again, sharing in such detail such deeply personal aspects of your journey, and for all the messages you have here. We're almost at the top of the hour, so before we sign off, is there anything you want to share with the people who are listening?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important message that I have is a message to intersex people. I know you are out there. I know there are a lot of intersex people. You would find that intersex people, sometimes they might not even discover that they are intersex simply because of all these other variations. Because if I'm not being ignorant about the current developments, I think they are now more than 46 variations of intersex. And sometimes you cannot tell just by looking at a person and say, oh, this one is intersex. Sometimes it's visible simply because of maybe the characteristics they then tend to maybe be visible to the naked eye,
Yeah,
due to however they affect, and then the person develops. Sometimes they do develop characteristics such as a beard and breasts at the same time, and other
yeah,
characteristics. And yeah, it then becomes questionable, especially to us people who want to be in those gender boxes and sex boxes, whereby we say, oh, but you are a woman, you are supposed to be like this, and you are supposed to be feminine, you are supposed to not, you don't have to have a beard and stuff like that, or you are a man, you are not supposed to be like. So sometimes
yeah,
you'd find that there are a lot of intersectionalities
yeah,
within the a whole sex and gender minority groups, in their diversity. You'd
yeah,
find that within these groups, they are actually intersex people. It's
yeah,
only that they haven't discovered that they are intersex. So, for those who have actually discovered, and for those um, who had the knowledge, say, for example, if it was evident at birth, I think this is my opportunity for me to speak to them, to everyone, to say that we need to be proud of who we are. We were made for a purpose, for a greater purpose, and we are beautiful in our own way, no matter somebody or anyone is going to acknowledge it or not. We are beautiful, we are intelligent, we are smart, we are fabulous. We can do anything in this world. We need to stop feeling sorry about ourselves. We need to be ashamed of whom God made us to be. We need
yeah,
to be proud. We need to take back the power,
yeah,
and we just need to
come out. I'm not encouraging people to come out when they are not ready, but for
Yeah.
those who need maybe support in terms of we need to
Yeah.
come out because there is power in numbers. We need to
Yeah.
speak with one voice. We need to be supportive of one another, and for our fellow sex and gender minority family within the LGBTI. I think for me, I just have to say that it's important for us to stop, maybe to start taking one another and stop using the same. Say, for example, we are running away from all the stigma and discrimination and all these other ugly things that are happening towards us. We are saying that we need to be equal. To say that if it is equality, let's use it
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
one another because we are one, despite our
Absolutely.
differences, because we are all different in our own way.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a very powerful message. As I said, again, not just for the LGBT community, but for all of us, that we are one and we have to find ways towards each other, not away from each other. Thank you very much, Ronnie, once again for joining us. I want to say thank